I've always been drawn to the quiet solitude of the Appalachian Trail. It's a place where the noise of the world fades, leaving only the sounds of nature, the rustling leaves, the distant calls of birds, the wind whispering through the trees. For years I've hiked sections of the trail, each journey a way to escape, to clear my mind. But this time was different. This time, I was going alone, planning to spend a full week deep in the wilderness, away from everything and everyone. The first few days were everything I'd hoped for. The air was crisp, the trail winding through dense, lush forests. I'd wake up to the sound of birdsong, hike all day, and set up camp wherever I felt like stopping. Each night, I'd lie under a blanket of stars, lulled to sleep by the gentle hum of the wild. It felt like a dream, a perfect escape from reality. But around the third day, something changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in the atmosphere that was hard to pin down. The trail seemed quieter, the air heavier. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Strange patterns in the underbrush, broken branches that looked too deliberate to be random. And then there were the sounds. At first I thought it was just the usual rustling of small animals, squirrels maybe, or the occasional deer. But the noises didn't match. They were off. Sometimes it was a faint crunching of leaves, other times a sharp, deliberate snap of a twig. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the feeling of being watched crept over me, cold and unshakable. One evening, after a long day of hiking, I set up camp near a small clearing. I was tired, my muscles aching, and all I wanted was to eat, relax, and get some sleep. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor, I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned, but there was nothing there, just trees, standing silent and still. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, hiding in the shadows, watching me. I forced myself to focus on my campfire, trying to block out the unease gnawing at my gut. I ate quickly, the food tasting like ash in my mouth, and crawled into my tent, zipping it shut behind me. I was exhausted, but my mind refused to quiet down, every sound outside amplifying in the silence. The soft rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the occasional breeze, it all felt like a symphony of foreboding. Then, just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it. A slow, deliberate movement, just outside my tent. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. I could hear my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else. The sound circled my campsite, soft but purposeful, as if something or someone was walking around, inspecting, searching. I wanted to believe it was an animal, maybe a curious bear or a deer drawn to the smell of food. But deep down, I knew better. The movements were too precise, too calculated. I lay there, paralyzed, listening as whatever it was continued to circle my tent, the sounds getting closer, then fading away, only to return again. I gripped the handle of my knife, my knuckles white, my mind racing. Should I get out, confront whatever it was? Or should I just lie there, pretending not to notice, hoping it would go away? I didn't move. I couldn't. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. I couldn't tell. Time seemed to stretch and bend, my senses sharp, hyper-aware of every little noise. Eventually, the sounds stopped, fading into the distance, and I allowed myself to breathe again. But sleep didn't come. I lay awake, eyes wide open, every sound outside making me flinch, waiting for it to return. By dawn, my nerves were shot. I packed up my gear in a hurry, desperate to put as much distance between myself and that spot as possible. I kept a brisk pace, my eyes scanning the trail ahead, behind, and to the sides, expecting to see something. But the forest was empty, silent, the way it always was. The rational part of my brain told me I'd just overreacted, that I was spooked by my own imagination. But a darker part, buried deep in my subconscious, whispered otherwise. That evening I didn't set up camp. I kept walking, my legs burning, fatigue gnawing at my bones. The trail seemed endless, stretching out before me, winding deeper into the woods. The sun dipped below the tree line, and soon I was walking in the dark, guided only by the weak beam of my flashlight. I wanted to stop, to rest, but every time I thought about setting up camp, that feeling would come back, cold and sharp, urging me to keep moving. Then as I rounded a bend, I saw it. A figure, standing just off the trail, half hidden behind a tree. My heart stopped. I shone my flashlight in its direction, but there was nothing there, just shadows playing tricks on my tired eyes. I stumbled backward, my breath ragged, my hands shaking. I didn't want to believe what I'd seen, but I couldn't ignore it either. I turned and ran, not caring where the trail led, just wanting to get away. I don't remember how long I ran, but eventually I stumbled out of the woods, my legs giving out beneath me. I lay there, gasping for air, my mind spinning, trying to make sense of what had happened. When I finally looked up, I saw the familiar sight of a trailhead, the parking lot beyond it. I was out. I was safe. It's been months since that trip, and I still can't explain what happened. I've replayed that week over and over in my head, trying to make sense of the noises, the figure I thought I saw, the feeling of being hunted. Maybe it was just my mind, cracking under the isolation, the silence. But deep down, I know better. Something was out there, watching me, following me. And whatever it was, it didn't want me there. I haven't been back to the trail since. Every time I think about it, I feel that same cold dread creeping up my spine. The wilderness, once my sanctuary, has become a place of nightmares, a place where things hide in the shadows, watching, waiting. And sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can still hear the faint rustling, the soft crunch of footsteps, somewhere just out of sight, reminding me of the thing I'll never truly escape. I never thought I'd be writing this, let alone admitting how it all still haunts me. We were just looking for a weekend of fun, a break from the monotony of everyday life. The plan was simple. A weekend hike through the forests of the Pacific Northwest. Nothing too intense, just a chance to breathe some fresh air, disconnect, and enjoy the wilderness. We were four: me, Ben, my girlfriend Emily, and our friends, Sarah and Chris. We'd been talking about this trip for weeks, counting down the days. The drive to the trailhead was filled with excitement and chatter. We loaded up our backpacks, double-checked the maps, and set off, the sun high in a clear blue sky. The forest was breathtaking, tall pines stretching toward the sky, their needles creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft green glow. We felt alive, every step taking us further from the noise of the city and deeper into the quiet, tranquil world of the woods. The first day was perfect. We laughed, we joked, we took pictures, Emily snapping photos of every flower, every odd-shaped tree, and every moment that made us smile. We found a nice clearing and decided it was as good a place as any to set up camp. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, and the shadows stretched long and thin between the trees. We built a small fire, gathered around it, and let the warmth seep into our bones as we shared stories and roasted marshmallows. As the darkness settled, the woods changed. What had been warm and inviting in the daylight became cold, almost menacing. I felt it first, a subtle shift in the air, like someone had turned the volume down on everything around us. The chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, All of it seemed to fade, leaving an eerie silence. I tried to shake it off, blaming it on an overactive imagination, but the feeling lingered, creeping under my skin. Then we started hearing it. The whispers. It was so faint at first, barely there, like a breeze rustling through the trees. I ignored it, thinking it was just the wind. But then it got louder, not louder in volume, but clearer, closer. It was like someone was standing just outside the light of our campfire, murmuring words I couldn't quite make out. I glanced at the others, expecting them to be laughing or joking, but they were silent, their eyes scanning the darkness, the same unease I felt reflecting on their faces. Chris was the first to speak. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We all nodded, exchanging nervous glances. Emily tried to brush it off, saying it was probably just the wind, but her eyes betrayed her, darting nervously around the shadows beyond the firelight. I should have suggested we pack up and leave then, but none of us wanted to be the one to admit we were scared. We decided to take turns keeping watch, just to be safe. I volunteered to go first, stoking the fire and trying to convince myself there was nothing to worry about. The others eventually drifted off to sleep, their breathing slow and steady, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. That's when I saw them, eyes, glowing yellow eyes staring at me from the darkness between the trees. They flickered, almost like they were blinking, but they didn't move, just stared, unblinking, unyielding. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon, but deep down I knew it wasn't. There was something too deliberate, too intelligent about the way they watched me. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat echoing in the silence. I wanted to wake the others, but I was afraid that if I moved, the eyes would disappear, and I'd convince myself it was all just a trick of the light. So I just sat there, staring back, hoping that whatever it was would lose interest and move on. But it didn't. The eyes stayed there, fixed on me, and slowly more began to appear. First 2, then 4, then 6. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, backing slowly towards the tents, and accidentally kicked a rock into the fire, sending sparks flying. The eyes vanished, swallowed by the darkness, but the whispers returned, louder this time, more distinct. It was like dozens of voices, all speaking at once, layered over each other. My hands were shaking, and I was about to wake the others when Chris shot up, wide-eyed and panicked. "What the hell is that?" he hissed, and I could see his eyes darting around, searching the darkness. Emily and Sarah woke up too, groggy and confused, but as soon as they heard the whispers, they were fully awake. We all gathered around the fire, huddled close, trying to reassure each other, but the fear was palpable. It was like the forest itself was closing in on us, suffocating us with its silence. We didn't sleep that night. Every time one of us glanced out into the trees, we'd see those eyes, watching, waiting. The whispers didn't stop, growing louder and more frantic as the night dragged on. We tried to rationalize it, to convince ourselves it was just our minds playing tricks on us. But deep down, we knew better. Something was out there, and it was watching us. As soon as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, we packed up and left, practically running back down the trail. The hike back was a blur, none of us saying a word, too scared to even look back. I kept expecting to see those eyes following us, just beyond the tree line, but they were gone. We made it back to the car, and as we drove away, I felt a sense of relief, like we'd escaped something that could have swallowed us whole. But even now, weeks later, I can still hear those whispers, faint and indistinct, like they're calling to me from just beyond the edge of my mind. And at night, When I'm lying in bed, I sometimes catch a glimpse of something in the shadows, a pair of eyes, watching me. It was supposed to be a perfect getaway. Just a few days in the Rockies, away from the chaos of the city, where Jessica and I could reconnect, celebrate our anniversary, and lose ourselves in the beauty of nature. Heartbreak Trail had caught my eye because of its name, but also because of the pictures I'd seen online: lush alpine meadows, towering pines, and the most stunning views of snow-capped peaks. A photographer's dream, they said, and I wanted to surprise Jessica by capturing the essence of our trip in every shot. The day started off exactly how I'd imagined. The sun was warm, but not too hot, and the trail was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of a distant branch. Jessica and I held hands, laughing and chatting about everything and nothing, the way we used to when we first started dating. It felt right. It felt like us. About an hour in, we reached a stretch where the trees parted, revealing an expanse of wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. We stopped, taking in the scenery, and I snapped a few pictures of Jessica standing there, her hair catching the light just right. Everything was perfect, until I saw him. It wasn't much at first, just a dark figure on the trail about 50 yards behind us. I could barely make out the shape. A tall man in a long, dark coat, standing unnaturally still, almost blending into the shadows cast by the trees. I mentioned it to Jessica, but she shrugged it off. "Probably just another hiker," she said, and I wanted to believe her. We continued walking, laughing, taking pictures, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As we hiked further, the figure remained at a distance, always there, just far enough to be barely visible, but close enough that I couldn't ignore it. Whenever I glanced back, there he was, standing completely still, watching us. A chill ran down my spine. "This is weird, right?" I asked Jessica, trying to keep my voice light. She looked back, and for a moment, I saw her expression falter. "It's fine, Mark," she said, but I could tell she didn't mean it. We decided to pick up the pace, trying to put some distance between us and this silent stranger. But no matter how fast we walked, he matched our speed. He didn't run or hurry, just walked at the same pace, always staying just out of clear sight, like a shadow trailing behind us. My heart began to pound, and I could feel Jessica's hand tighten around mine. We stopped for a break at a small clearing, pretending to take in the view, but really just trying to catch our breath and plan our next move. I took out my phone and tried to zoom in on the figure, but he was gone. "See?" Jessica said, forcing a smile. "He probably turned back." But I wasn't convinced. We stayed there for a few more minutes, scanning the trail, but the figure didn't reappear. We shared a relieved laugh, and I could see the tension begin to melt off Jessica's shoulders. We were being silly, paranoid, letting our imaginations run wild. I put my arm around her, and we decided to keep going, this time with a plan. If we saw him again, we'd head back to the car. We'd just call it a day and laugh about it over dinner. It wasn't until we rounded a sharp bend in the trail that we saw him again. This time, he wasn't far behind. He was ahead of us, standing dead center on the path, as if he'd been waiting. My breath caught in my throat. The sunlight was dimmer now, blocked by the thick canopy above, and I could barely make out his face. He was wearing a hood that cast shadows over his features, but I could see just enough to know that he was looking straight at us. Jessica whispered my name, her voice barely audible, and I realized she was shaking. "It's okay," I said, trying to sound calm, even though my heart was hammering against my chest. "We'll just walk past him." But as we moved forward, he stepped closer, blocking our way, his face still hidden beneath the hood. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Maybe he was lost, or injured, or something. But the way he stood there, completely motionless, didn't make sense. It was as if he was waiting for us to get close enough to... Without warning, he lifted his hand, pointing directly at Jessica. I've never seen her look so scared. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out, and then, as if breaking a spell, she screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound that echoed off the mountains, cutting through the silence like a knife. I grabbed her arm, and we bolted, running back down the trail as fast as we could, not daring to look back. We didn't stop until we reached the trailhead, panting and gasping for air, our bodies drenched in sweat. Our car was the only one in the lot. For a moment I thought we were safe. But as we reached the car, fumbling for the keys, I glanced over my shoulder. And he was there, standing just a few feet away, closer than he'd ever been, his face still obscured. I managed to get the door open, practically shoving Jessica inside, before scrambling into the driver's seat. I turned the key, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit it into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the gas pedal, speeding down the mountain road, praying he wouldn't follow. But as we drove, something changed. The air grew colder, and a thick fog began to roll in, swallowing the road. I could barely see a few feet ahead, but I didn't dare slow down. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see him standing there, watching, waiting. We didn't talk on the drive back. Jessica was curled up in the passenger seat, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. I could still hear her scream, still feel the weight of that figure's stare, as if it had burned a hole through my chest. By the time we reached the safety of our hotel, it was dark, and the fog had lifted, leaving us with nothing but the lingering silence of the mountains. I tried to explain it away, to tell myself it was just a hiker, someone playing a cruel joke. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something I couldn't understand. Even now, weeks later, I find myself waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced I can see him standing at the foot of our bed, pointing, his face hidden in shadows. Maybe we'll go back someday. Maybe I'll be able to face that trail without feeling like I'm being watched, like there's someone out there waiting for me. But not today. Today, I'm just grateful we made it back.